Hi guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I am your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I'm talking to Peter Fitschen. It's been a while since we've spoken. If you don't know Pete, he has been on the podcast many a times, but it's been a little while. He has a PhD in nutritional sciences, he's a natural pro bodybuilder, and we talk about his last contest prep, where he was very successful in his last season. He kept it all quiet. We dig into why he kept it quiet, and then we talk a bit about why he has long off seasons, why people shouldn't compete kind of year after year, why kind of taking multiple mini cuts all the time isn't going to lead to your best progress in your off season, and just so many great details, including chat about tattoos and using dark as a competitor. And I think as a competitor or a coach of competitors, this is just a really valuable listen for you. We also touched on some of his peaking and how that changed season to season as well. So definitely make sure to check it out. And as a reminder, guys, it's really useful to have your likes, your recommendations, your reviews. So any comments, anything like this, it's all super helpful. So we appreciate every single one. And I just want to take a moment to get a word from our sponsor. Today it's Caldera Lab. I'm just going to give you a short little summary of that now. First impressions matter. There are no two ways about it. And the first thing someone sees is your face, whether that's a good or bad impression. That is something you have somewhat under your control. And that's something I decided to give myself more control with, because our sponsor of today's podcast is a leading skincare product, Caldera Lab, who are clinically proven to help reduce wrinkles, reduce fine lines, and anti-aging. So it's boosting my confidence to make me feel better in my own skin, which I think is really, really valuable. And if you're interested in trying some of their products, you can use the code REVIVE to get a discount off Caldera Lab. Like you guys, I take care of my physique through my nutrition, through my training, through great sleep, take care of my mind through education, like listening to this podcast. So kind of taking care of my skin was just another layer to this. So I've been using, obviously, the clean slate, using the base, and then obviously here as well at night using the Icon and the Good. It's just been easy to get this into your routine. And similar to brushing your teeth, you might not see benefits immediately, but if you don't brush your teeth for a week, you certainly notice that. And similar with this, the effects of compounding, you see the benefits over time. So again, if you guys would like to try out the products at Caldera Lab, we have our discount code REVIVE. You can use that. That'll be linked in the description, and we hope you enjoy it. But without further ado, let's get into the podcast with Peter Fitschen. Hi guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I have Peter Fitschen back on the show. This is actually Peter, it's your sixth time on the show. I don't know if you know that. It's been a couple of years though since you've been on the show.
Yeah, I didn't realize it'd been that many times. That's awesome. So I'm thanks for having me back.
Because now the podcast's been running for like years, I'm always careful to look back and be like, how many times has this person come on? How long's it been? And I'm always shocked. Again, it's been 6 times that you've been on here, but it's also been 2 years since your last time you're on here, whereas it doesn't feel like that long.
Yeah. No, that's what I was going to say is it's you've been doing it enough years now where there's probably a year or two between each of them.
Yeah, it's mind blowing to kind of think that, but it's also great. And I love that I've been able to like develop like online relationships almost with like someone like yourself, and with Cliff we were just talking about, where I think that just leads to nicer episodes where, the rapport is a little bit there and it's less stressful. At least that's the way I always feel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, I always enjoy coming on and chatting. So thanks for having me.
For sure. And for those who aren't aware, who haven't been listening to the podcast that long, and maybe you only tuned in the last 2 years, so you haven't listened to the episodes of Pete, he has a PhD in nutritional sciences. He is a pro natural bodybuilder. And so perfect candidate for the show. I always say that like the people are like competitors and also like the science geeks, as it were. They're the people I always end up talking to, because I think just have so much value to share on both sides of the coin. Not that like a scientist pure out and out and a complete utter like bro can't provide insights, but I like the combination there. I think there's just something special about that. So Pete's a great person to kind of chat to and listen to. And on the kind of note of bodybuilding, I know you just competed, I think like just about 4 months ago.
Yeah. It was March and April. So yeah, my photo shooting first show were in March and my second show was early April. So yeah, about 3.5 months since my last show now.
And am I right in thinking you mentioned being about 20 pounds up? Is that still where you're kind of hovering, or?
I'm not quite 20 up yet. I was
Okay.
158.6 morning a show in the Kentucky show where I looked the best, my last show, and I'm like in the 176s right now, so I'm 18 pounds or so up. I mean, I'll need to gain some more back yet to like really be super strong in the gym and hit some PRs and really, I mean, I feel my best. I mean, I feel pretty much normal again at this point, but a little more weight on me, I can move a little more weight in the gym and be in a better off-season spot.
Yeah, for sure. Like everyone has that. I don't know what. I guess it's the way it's talked about now. I used to talk about it in upper and lower settling points, like in terms of body fat,
Yeah,
which I think some people still use. And now it's been like, maybe it's intervention points, like an upper and lower intervention point of body
yeah,
fat. But it's kind of this range of body fat where you feel best and most productive.
yeah. And for me, that's usually like 180 to 195. That's kind of my range, range where I'm good. And then I can still be I can still be healthy and like function well and not lose a ton of strength into the low 170s. I'm not hitting any PRs there. I'm not making progress there. Um, I I have very little leeway. Like I'm, when I get into the low 170s, like if I have something a little off with some food, my weight spikes. Where like in the 180s, 190s, that doesn't happen. So like that's kind of, I just over the years have kind of learned like those are kind of my limits, right? Like I have to be maybe 15 over to be healthy and functional. I need to be 20, 25 at the lowest to really feel good and, hit some big progress in the gym. And there'll be times I'll drift 30, 35 over. And that's why I work with Cliff in the off season, because then I have someone tell me like, hey man, like we got to run a little bit of a cut here. You can't just keep gaining because, left to our own devices, right? Like, we just keep eating and lifting heavy and I think for a lot of us guys at least and we'd never that's how I ended up at 210 back when I was younger and had to diet off like close to about 55 pounds in 6 months.
Is that the heaviest you've ever been? 210 pounds.
210, yeah. So 210, I was 210 when I was like 19, 20-ish. So I did my first show at 145 and they told me I was too small when I was 18. This is back in 2004. So we didn't have, and I was too small. I mean, I've posted pictures. I didn't really hardly look like I lifted it when I was 18 and I had been lifting weights for 2 years. And, I needed to get bigger. And so I got up to 210. I just like, I ate, quote unquote clean, right? Like I rarely cheated off my diet. I just ate tons of, quote unquote clean foods and got up to 210 and it was not pretty. And then that was the first prep 2006. I worked with Lane and man, I made his life difficult because he had to diet me down to like I was like mid 150s by the end of that. So 6 months, I went from 210 to mid 150s. That was just an absolutely miserable prep. And really since then, couple off seasons, the next couple off seasons, I only got up to maybe like 190-ish. And since working with Cliff, he's pushed me up as high as like 198. I think it's about the highest I've ever gotten working with him, 196, 198, a couple of times. But I haven't touched 200 again since I was, that was like 17 years ago now.
And yeah, I think from everyone I've spoken to, at least it feels like this way. Everyone goes through that kind of like, I don't know if you call it a dreamer bulk at some point during their lifting career where, again, I did the same thing when my first bulk. It was like, if I eat these like clean foods, I'll gain clean weight and it won't be body fat. And then like 30, 40 pounds down the line, I'm like, hey, I definitely gained some fat here.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, what I eat today is still probably like 90% of those foods. But yeah, and I'm still training harder than ever. And I'm probably as strong as I've ever been at this point. But yeah, I'm not going to get up to 200, 210. It's funny because people in the gym will ask me, what do you weigh or how much you weigh now? I had a guy this morning ask me that at the gym and I was like, yeah, I'm up to like $176. Like, and granted, it's going to go up more yet, but I'm not going to be 200 plus, like, in the off season.
Yeah, it makes sense to me as well. Like that. Again, when I think about muscle growth, I think there are a number of people, and maybe I was under this impression at one point where I was just like, you have to really, really push body weight up really high. But if you can get into a zone of body weight where you can hit PRs, you can be productive. When I think about what's driving muscle growth, it's the training. So if you can train well and be a bit leaner, that's probably ultimately better than just pushing up for the sake of it.
Yeah, as long as you're eating plenty, and not trying to like diet and be in a deficit all the time, because I think that's the biggest mistake a lot of people make. Like when they, a lot of people left to their own devices, when they try to gain, they gain way too fast. They eat, tons and tons of food, and you'll see them gain 15 pounds in 3 months or something like that. And then you turn around and they're dieting again right away. And you just cut into, like, if you could have made that 15 pounds take 10, 12 months, you could have had a whole, 10, 12 months, year of like surplus and progress and gains. And a lot of times they just, cut that short, gain that 15 pounds in 3 months, and now they're dieting again. And I feel like some people can't get out of their own way, that they're just constantly dieting. And yeah, that inevitably cuts into your progress.
You're so right with that, because I think I definitely was on that side of where you mentioned before, so long as you're eating well, I kind of stayed too lean, and I kept like, I'd get like a little bit soft and I'd cut immediately. So I was just like, again, you're kind of yo-yo dieting at that point almost, but over an extended period of time. Yeah.
And I mean, you're not really getting anywhere, right? Because you're not sticking to a gaining phase long enough to like grow and make progress. But then you're just cutting back to where you were. Like, you're not cutting to like get super lean either. So you just kind of like spin your wheels in this little 5 or 10 pound range and never really commit to something enough to really progress.
Yeah, for sure. And actually that brings me to, it was a question I had later down the line, I think, that I was going to ask you about in terms of your off-season approach. Do you incorporate mini cuts, like when you do hit that like 190 to 195? Is it like a mini cut to get you back down? How does that look for you?
Yeah, that's normally, because I've actually worked with Cliff since 2014, so it's been almost 10 years that I've worked with him, off seasons included. And so so I usually, the approach we typically take is, once I start getting up into like the low mid 190s, we kind of look at how I'm looking, and we can drift a couple more pounds, or we need to cut. And so then we usually run some sort of cut to get me down somewhere, usually just to like the low 180s, something like that. Try to drop that in 2 to 3 months, get 15 pounds off me, and 12, 15 pounds in 2-3 months, and then let's spend another like 10, 12 months just slowly drifting again, and then a couple months of cutting. And then that adds up over time. When I take 3 and 4 years between shows, if you have, 10, 12 months of gaining for every 2 months of dieting, that's a lot of time out of a deficit to really progress and get somewhere. And that's something I'm always big on is if you're taking an off season, like most of that time should be spent not in a deficit if you're going to actually make progress. And it's funny because my prep actually last year started off as like I wasn't planning on competing this spring initially. Like, it started off last like June, like late May, early June. I was up in like the mid 190s, and it was like hey, let's diet you down to like, upper 170s, low 180s. And so I think I dropped like, 17 pounds in like 12 weeks or something like that. And we were kind of just working my food back up, kind of coming out of it. And my weight was kind of holding, and I was looking pretty good. And so then it was like, okay, it was probably early fall last year. It was like, what if I take this further and potentially try to compete, so we almost used it as like positioning me for prep, right? Like I cut down. I was like 177, I think, something like that. 176, 177, something like that. Probably roughly where I am right now. And we held there for probably 6-8 weeks, worked my food up, and then went the rest of the way for early spring. And but yeah, it was funny because like I wasn't even planning on competing. So the initial part of my cut was just like an off-season cut to get me a little bit leaner, and the thought was we're going to do another gain phase afterwards, and it turned out I just dieted down and competed a little sooner than I was planning.
I think that's quite nice sometimes when, like, I'm a stickler for like loving plans, like long-term planning, and like I already have like a sketched out plan for next time I'm going to compete, but part of me is like, especially if you are someone who can hold a bit of a leaner off season. So a mini cut does get you down pretty lean. And like you said, a few more weeks of eating up, you fill out and you're like, ooh, like I'm holding this well. I feel pretty good. Yeah. You could enter a prep.
I was maybe like, that point I'd have been like 18 pounds over like what I was carved up show day, like holding that, looking pretty good. Yeah.
And is that, I know, I think I've spoken to you about this before, and Cliff as well, where you like ideally to get someone within a shooting range where they're not having to lose, like you did with Lane, having to lose huge amounts.
You don't want that. Yeah, no, you don't want that at all. I mean, I've actually had that conversation with a couple of clients of mine recently here, who are looking at like next spring. We're kind of talking about, okay, we got like 30 or 35 pounds to go. Like when are we going to start dieting here? August, September, something like that. Let's get the first little bit off, diet break over the holidays potentially. And then have you in a better spot to, pull back and start in the new year, because, for most people who are trying to do like a spring show, you got to be pretty lean to start the year to be able to be ready in time for them, right? Like there's going to have to, for most people, some amount of dieting is going to happen prior to the new year if you're going to be all the way, lean and as good as you could be by spring. There are those exceptions to the rule that can stay relatively lean and maybe only have 10 or 15 pounds to lose, and they start in the new year and they're on stage in like April. I'm not one of them. Most people aren't one of them. And so, no, that's conversations I've definitely been having with some of my clients who sit, 30, 40 over stage, like, okay, when are we going to start here and position you so that we can, have you in shooting distance to start a prep for spring.
Yeah, I totally understand that, where, if you've maybe finished a show and you slowly transition up, like you said, you've had like 12 months of being able to gain, and then you're kind of in this like peak mass sort of zone where, mini cut can get you back down and it can buy you a good amount of time of massing, but you're back up to peak. Yeah. Eventually you kind of, like, you've climbed up the mountain, you have to like slowly think about climbing back down. Yeah. And I think that idea of positioning yourself where you said you're eating, building food back up, you're leaner than like peak, like off-season lean, peak massed. So then the kind of show transitional period is going to be so much smoother, just having to lose less, like less of a journey to have to travel essentially.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I always tell people like more time is typically always better when you're dieting for a show. Like if you're ready early, that's great. There's plenty of things you can do, right? You can find an earlier show. You can add food back and slow down rate of loss. You can diet break. You can be ready a few weeks early and walk food up, reverse, go in. You can test out some peaking stuff ahead of time. Like there's lots of good things that can happen if you have more time and you end up ahead. If you on the other hand, if you're behind, like that, there's nothing good that happens there when you have to drop like 2 and 3 pounds a week the last month to try to crash down in. You're probably going to lose more muscle that way because you're more susceptible for muscle loss when you're super lean like that, and you're not going to look as good as you could, on stage. And so, more time's always better. I mean, I think that you probably find that too as a coach, like that's almost one of the biggest battles with like new clients is getting them to like give themselves more time and appropriate amounts of time to diet for a show. Because those that do, I mean, everything just goes so much smoother. Like the prep as a whole, like the vibe of the prep and the amount of stress that they have is just, it's so much better when there's more time. Versus someone where the timeline's tight, and you don't have time to like, some of those like, do we need to adjust? Do we not? Like if someone has time, you can wait and see. Maybe you don't need to adjust. And if you do, you got time to wait and see and make sure you do. If you're short on time, there isn't a wait and see. It's like, okay, well, looks like it's slowing down. We don't have time to wait. So we got to adjust and push. And sometimes that can, lead to unnecessary adjustments too, but you don't have time to wait and see. Time is and trying to get people to give themselves adequate time is oftentimes a battle as a coach.
Yeah, it's worse when someone approaches you, I don't know, like 2 months out from a show or something, and you're just like, oh God, like, this is not ideal. Or I've had it similar with first time competitors, not so much now, because I think a lot of people come and they already have awareness of like my methodologies or whatever. But I've had it where they're like, like, can't we delay prep by like a month? And I'm like, a month of prep is so valuable versus a month of off season, where like the amount you could gain is so small versus the amount of time that the value of that for prep.
Yeah. Well, I've had several times too, just over the years, where like people will come to me, be like, yeah, I want to start prep in 3 months. I think I'm going to gain like another 10 pounds these next 3 months. So I'm going to be here when we start prep. And I basically have to tell them, like, listen, you shouldn't gain anything. And we probably need to start prep now, like if we're going to have you, as good as you could be on stage,
Yeah.
like, you know, there are, sure, you could diet faster and probably get there and whatever, but you're not going to be as good as you could be, and so if the goal is being as good as you possibly can be, that extra time and just the stress is so much lower. I mean, I was ahead in my prep. It went so smooth. I mean, we did the first phase, like off season cut over the summer, took that diet break and then pulled back, for like 6, 7 weeks, then pulled back again. I was dieting through a fall. And by like January, I was within like 5 pounds of stage weight at like, I was, 5, 7 pounds away. Like when I went down to Missouri for the fat muscle seminar in January, like we're doing posing, I waited, I kept my prep secret. So I stayed pretty covered up, but like that night at the gym, most people had cleared out. It was pretty much just me, Cliff and John and very few other people. And so I stripped down and I was doing some posing and like, I was within like 5, 7 pounds of stage weight then at like 2+ months out. But that allowed me to take a lot of diet breaks, near the end. I mean, I think in the last like 3 months of prep, I don't think Cliff had me in a deficit for more than 4 or 5 weeks in a row without having a week at maintenance because I was ahead. It was much less stressful, for sure. I'm glad it just went so smooth. I was ahead. So I had all these diet breaks and, weeks where I'd have extra refeeds or whatever to slow things down. And I still got there. I was still leaner than I've ever been. Even in crappy cell phone stage shots, you can see striated glutes from the back. And so I got there but it was just so much better, having that time.
For sure. Yeah. And something I used to be concerned about until my last competition prep was being lean for too long. And I think there probably is an amount of time that is too long, and it's probably going to differ person to person. But when you are including back-to-back refeeds and diet breaks after a number of weeks, it's surprising how normal you can feel, like normal enough whilst being like pounds away from completely shredded through.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say, like, when I got to completely shredded, I don't know how long I could have stayed there. I mean, I probably would have started looking worse fairly, you know what I mean?
Okay.
I don't know if I could have stayed as lean as I was at my last show. Like, my strength it was like, at that point, like, I felt terrible. I couldn't sleep anymore the last few weeks. Like, but it was amazing, though, how good I felt. I was like, 163 or so in January, and granted that wasn't carved up or anything, but I hit as low as 155, not depleted, 150. I think I had a 152.6 or 152.8 depleted, but like carved up as 150. 58 or so, 158.6 morning of the show. I looked the best. So I was probably like within 8 pounds of my lowest. I was not depleted during prep, 7, 8 pounds, and like actually didn't feel that bad yet. Because we were able to take it slowly. But yeah, the end still felt terrible. I mean, I don't know if there's any way around that. When you get that lean, I don't know how long I could have held that. So that's why I knocked out photo shoot, 10 days later show, 2 weeks later show, and I was done before most of my clients got started for the year.
I guess that's having spoken to you off air and how busy you are with your weekends and all your shows. There's just no way I guess that's why you have to get out of the way. Really, it forces you.
Yeah, I just from a practicality standpoint, like, I don't need to go do like world or something. I'm not like ever, genetically, like I'm not going to ever win like a pro world title or something like that. And so for me at this point, I mean, I've accomplished more than I ever thought I would competing. And so it's about just looking better every time. And the where I compete is less important than the getting better and continuing to do this into my 40s and 50s and hopefully 60s, and continue to do it at a high level and look as good as I possibly can. And for now, keep getting better, because I still can. And so, yeah, I prefer just to do shows as early in the year as possible, because then the worst of prep is like during a time of year where I'm not going shows, to shows, I'm in a stretch right now where I'm traveling 4 straight weekends between shows and seminars. And so, I don't have that at the end of my prep. And so, I can just get done and then I can worry about my clients after that.
Yeah, no, it makes so much sense that way around. And actually it's refreshing almost for someone like I don't like to ever say it. Like my ambition is to hopefully go pro at some point. Like there's a part of me that thinks I might be able to do it, but of course I feel like I will need some luck on my side a little bit because I'm just realistic with the kind of shape I have.
It absolutely takes that's what I tell people all the time. There's a luck component for sure, because when I won my pro card, I won the lightweight class by a point. I won the overall straight up because this was 2012, so this is back before Men's Physique, before Classic, when like shows were bigger and there were multiple open classes and not every show was a pro qualifier and you had to go, find them, right? And they were super competitive. And so, but yeah, like I got lucky. Like I won by my class by a point, split decision. Same guy that beat me by a point there, we went and did a pro show a few years later. He took third, I took fourth out of like a class of 9. And he beat me by a point. Like in that show, like, just, what I mean? There's like a luck, like you said, a luck component.
Yeah, but it's similar. Like my ambition is hopefully to go pro at some point, maybe. And then it's like, when you're in the pro ranks, like you said, like I'm being realistic. I don't know how well I'd be able to fare at like a WNBF World Pro show, like let alone trying to go pro at that point. So, but it's refreshing because this is your job, this is like your life, like it's a huge part of you, but you're still able to be like realistic with your ambitions with it, but it doesn't deter you from the process. And I think it's nice for people to be aware that, and that's something I like to ride, is like I'm like to be realistic, but also I can still love it and invest it just as much as the person who is going to be winning like a pro worlds, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my goal is still absolutely to like take it as far as I possibly can, right? Like, I've dieted down to stage lean 7 times in the last 19 years. And, every time I've gotten better. And so, I mean, obviously, I'm going to keep pushing to keep getting better and better and better. And, and like I said, I've been doing this since I was 18. I'm 37 going on 38 now. And, next spring will be 20 years since my first show.
That's crazy.
But yeah, that's blows my mind. Right. And so, I want to be the person, when you go to these shows and there's 50 plus and 60 plus guys, like in classes, classes of 50 plus, 60 plus, there are more shows now that have 50 plus pro classes. There are probably, at least 3-4 shows I'm aware of that have 50 plus pro classes. Like I want to, still be doing it at that point at a high level. So yeah, I still have, my own goals and ambitions. And I just, you gotta, I don't know, I gotta balance it with coaching, right? Like I don't get me wrong. Like I had my last show this year, I had 5 clients compete the same day I did. 2 were where I was and 3 were elsewhere. You can do it. It's absolutely possible. And they all did great. It worked out very well. But it's easier if you cannot have 5 people competing the same day that you're competing. But I mean, I've done it both ways, right? Like that wasn't the first time I've had multiple people compete the same day as me. Won't be the last. But yeah, if I can avoid, some of the weekends where I have 6 and 8, people in 3-4 different places competing on the same weekend as me, I'll do it.
It's hard enough having multiple people just competing, let alone you then having to compete too. But I guess the way that you like to peak is generally like on show day you're peaked. So hopefully there's not too much that needs to go on. Like you have a plan, and also you have Cliff in your corner, which probably is a lifesaver at that point.
Yeah, no, that's the nice part, right? And I mean, really, now that we, my first show this year, we rapid backloaded like usual. And it was the second show in a row. So my last show of 2020, I didn't look very good on stage. I had thought it was because it was a long contest season. Like I was supposed to compete in March. I competed in June, July, because the world shut down for a couple months there. I just traveled to wherever shows were. And I thought, man, it's just because I've been dieting for like 14 months. This prep got stretched out. Like, that's why I'm not looking that great. This July show go to my first show this year, and the same thing happened when I rapid backloaded. And it was so weird because I had always, all 3 shows in 2016, great. First 2 shows in 2020, great. But then I had 2 shows in a row where I just didn't, respond. And Cliff had me send pictures the next morning after the show, after I kept things tight the night of. I looked awesome. And so for my last show, my Kentucky show this year, show where I looked the best ever, we actually rapid backloaded at even harder on Thursday. I think it was 1,111, something like that, carbs on Thursday. So we just shifted everything up a day, depleted Sunday through Wednesday on meat and vegetables and oil, and did a huge load Thursday. But Friday, I was only Friday was, as my clients are getting, closer to their shows and doing whatever with their peaks, my day was only I think I ate 220 grams of carbs, 2,400 calories. It was a lower day. It was a cleanup day. And I looked really, really good come Saturday morning. So I think that helped too, that I also rapid backloaded a day earlier. So, that just happened to be what, worked out and looked best. But yeah, that was an interesting, kind of finding here recently. I don't know why. Cliff even said that. He goes, it's like your load look almost has changed in the last few years, which it has. I mean, but it's interesting.
Yeah, straight. I know of Cliff's he came over to the UK for a seminar, so I still remember he has the cleanup day after the backload, and I guess that's what you've transitioned to. And I guess it's a good reminder for people, you can't just stick to a fixed plan and expect it to always work. You have to keep eyes on and adjust accordingly.
Yeah, no, and that was pretty much, that was exactly it. And I don't know if it takes longer now for me to process the carbs, because I'm not a spilled watery mess. Those 2 times where I said last show 2020, first show of this year, it wasn't that I was a spilled watery mess like you'd think when someone eats 1,000 grams of carbs. I was flat. And by the time you'd fill me out, I would end up watery because you'd have to throw so much food at me on show day so fast. And so, I think it just gave me more time. Because interestingly, my weight was the same the day after the rapid backload as show day after a cleanup day. Which is really weird. That's what I was kind of wondering too. When we did it, I was I wonder how much my weight's going to drop. I stepped on the scale first thing in the morning, show day. I'm exact same as the day before. So I don't know if it just takes my body longer to process that, amount of food at this point, or what has changed. Cliff said maybe it's just me getting older, but he finds me an interesting case study because I've worked with him for almost a decade, and there, you know what I mean? He's been able to prep me for three different preps, and he's peaked me for 8 different shows now, so you see it as a coach, right? If you work with someone over and over and over again, it is interesting to see how things change over time, because you don't always get the opportunity to work with someone long term like that.
No, for sure. Yeah, if you have more than one season with someone, that's pretty nice, let alone multiple 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, no, the second season with someone can be so much easier than the first, because you kind of just learn their tendencies, right? I have a female client who I prepped. The first time I prepped her, it took forever because we found out that she was one of these people who has these super adaptive metabolisms, right? So it was someone who was eating well over 2,000 calories a day. And we had to get her down to 14 or 1,500 to get her losing. And so we thought, we'll just chip away a little bit. And it just took forever to find where she could lose. Second prep, we're all right, we know how this goes. Let's just drop it down there and get going. We know what the answer is going to be if we just try to slowly chip it down. But just knowing that, right? Keep it moving more efficiently. And so, I think it can be really valuable to, if you can work with a coach multiple times or have clients that you work with multiple preps, you learn things and you can use those things.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And actually, a question I had for you, Pete, was you mentioned having a longer prep and maybe having time to eat into, I think you said something along the lines of eating into shows. Is that ever Is that something you did this time around? Were you able to eat into things? Do you prefer
Mhm.
that to actually, if you do that as a second question, if I can, do you still would you still like deplete and do a backload there, or would you just kind of ride the calories moving up and the carbs being higher?
Yeah. Yeah. So I this time uh didn't actually, we pushed all the way in, because the first show, just with the peak not going the greatest, it was like, all right, let's get you a pound or two. I think I dropped about 2 pounds in the 2 weeks between shows. You know what I mean? And we pushed for a little more loss, get me tighter, load harder. But I have ate into shows before, and I still depleted and rapid backloaded when I did that. Um, Depending on clients, I would say maybe not. You know what I mean? It depends on the person. I mean, I've had like, especially in like a division like bikini where you don't need an aggressive as a load. I've had situations where we just spend the last 2 3 weeks working food up. Someone looks great, their food's high, and we don't change anything for like the entire last week. I had a client, um, actually first time competitor, win a OCB pro card at 19 years old, and like this big show. Like there were, close to a dozen in her class, like 3 or 4 open classes, like huge show. And she won it at 19. She has this just crazy structure, but like she was ready 3 4 weeks early. We literally just walked her food up. She was looking really good at a week out. And I was like, you know what? Let's just keep doing this every day. And every day she'd send me pictures, and every day it looked good, like, and we just coasted in. I mean, without really any sort of peak. We had already walked food up, and that filled her out, and she looked great.
Yeah, I think that's the key there, isn't it? It's like if you already look like the look you like, if you think this look couldn't get much better, it's like, is it worth the punt of the risk of trying to manipulate something too much in peak week? Especially if you've walked food up like that, then
Yeah.
you've had such a consistent look day to day.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that was the thing. Like, because I was like, oh, do we need to do anything? And like, I'd have her send me pictures every day, and every day her weight be the same, her look would be the same. Like, no, we don't need to change anything. Like, you look awesome. Like, why would we mess with this? Right. Like, because you want peak week to be predictable, and so if you're changing, people change so many variables, and then they start looking worse, and then it's, well, why am I looking worse? Like, which of these 8 things are causing me to look worse? So if you can change fewer variables, or know why you're changing each thing you're changing, when you're changing things, like, I think that's important. And yeah, I depends on the person. Some people we may still load and deplete and stuff, and some we may just reverse in, just walk food up, eat into the show. I mean, that's an ideal place to be, right? Be ready a couple weeks early, because oftentimes in there too, I'll test out larger loads, if they're ready early. So if we're a month out or so, and it's like, hey, you're looking better. How are we looking around to refeed? At a month out or so, and we find out, okay, you're looking better after your refeed. Uh, Oftentimes, if we have time in those final weeks, maybe we say, okay, let's like double the size of your refeed this week and see how you look after. What happens if we stack multiple refeeds in a row? Do you still look better?
Yeah.
And you can play around with that and kind of get an idea of how hard you might need to load the last week, and to keep that a little more predictable, rather than just like blindly going in and being like, okay, well, I'm going to eat like 3 times as many carbs as a refeed today and hope it looks good tomorrow.
Yeah, you definitely want to have like you said, frequent eyes on. And again, if you have time to be able to test things out with
Yeah.
using refeeds and stuff, it just becomes invaluable at that point.
Yeah, yeah, because there's less guesswork. Because and if someone doesn't have time to test things out, and if they're at least doing multiple shows, uh, you can you can use what I usually stay a little more conservative, maybe the first show, and then use what you learn and what you observe the first time to get a plan in place for other shows. I mean, I just had a client, win a PNBA Pro bodybuilding show this last weekend, and we didn't. It was early. Like, he's going to target some of the bigger shows at the end of the year, and we know we need to get another 5 7 pounds off. You know what I mean? Before then, but he's lean. He's just not. If we're going to go do some of these big shows, we need to be leaner, and so. because like you said, the pro level at those shows are insane. And so we, this first load, we gave him a day a little bit bigger in a refeed Thursday, and we gave him something even bigger yet because he was still super tight as the day went on Friday. And so I think he had probably like 1.5 times a refeed Thursday and 2 times a refeed Friday. And looked great Saturday, but like, we gave him more food Saturday morning, but you could see on stage by the end of prejudging, I was like, man, like we should have given him more food. And so that was the discussion right away is, okay, we're loading harder in some fashion, whether it be more days, more carbs, whatever. But we know now that as a baseline, we need more than this. And so now we had a few weeks till the next show, push for a little more loss, and then load even harder, whether that be more days, more food, or both. Based on how he's looking, but like we at least, you know what I mean? And then by the time you get to those later shows at the end of the year, you kind of ran the protocol a couple of times and you're like, all right, like this is what's going to work best for you. Let's do this and make sure you're best for these biggest shows. So if someone can do 2 or 3 shows, you can usually they can get better, as you go.
Yeah, in the UK, at least with one of the biggest federations here, with the UK FBA, which you might have had clients compete with before, I imagine you have, and they have qualifiers and then they have finals. And once you become quite competitive, you need to think about like, okay, so I don't want to peak for like the qualifier and then have months before the finals. I kind of want to be maybe 5-7 pounds if I'm that good that I can compete at that level and qualify quite comfortably. And then that also gives you time, again, like you said, to have like a play around with these things to know what's going to work best for that individual.
No, and that's a conversation I had with this particular client he and I have had in recent weeks. Like, we don't want you to be all of the way like striated glutes shredded in July if you're still thinking you're going to want to do shows in October, if not November. That's you don't want to hold that level of lean for 3 and 4 months. So get with, like you said, get within 5 pounds or so and be very, very, very lean, and then tighten up more into your later shows if you're going to spread them out that much. You don't want to stay stage lean that close to stage lean for that long.
And it's kind of thinking about stage lean, at least this is, again, my last prep. I kind of felt like I had a big gap between like my first kind of show, which was like a warm up, and then WNBF Worlds in the end that I ended up going to. There was multiple months between them. But there's stage lean, and then there's like just completely shredded inside out. And I don't even know. And I maybe I was like 175 pounds, and I dropped I dropped maybe another 6 pounds between those at most. I don't even know if I had like maybe another 2 pounds. Like for you, I guess you found like your stage weight, and that tends to stay fairly static season to season. And that's inside out, like stage shredded. Is there like when you're walking someone towards like trying to get everything in, how do you kind of go about, is it worth like just continuing pushing this person, or now is their physique degrading? Do you find you have to walk that line carefully sometimes?
Oh yeah, no, you definitely do. And so you got to keep an eye. I mean, that's where progress pictures become more important. And so that's where, I'm someone where most of the time, unless someone's close to a show, I'm like the coach who's like, stop taking selfies in the mirror, stop sending me so many pictures, give change time to happen. And a lot of times I'll tell clients I want monthly pictures, like off-season monthly, even early stages of prep or an off-season cut monthly. And then as we get closer, then it's okay. Now we're 3-4 months out. Now let's start looking every 2 weeks. And okay, now we're 6-8 weeks out. Now, now we got to look every week. And we start really getting close the last couple of weeks. I'm like, okay, you're checking with me twice a week. I want pictures at every update. And if we're testing out peaking stuff, it could be pictures multiple days around a refeed or something, or around a test load. And so, the closer those shows come, the more frequently we're taking pictures and keeping an eye on things, because at that point, the visual part matters so much more. You've seen it, I'm sure, where if you're really, really lean and, near stage lean, and you lose 1 or 2 pounds, you put your pictures side by side and it's like, man, it looks like you lost like 5 pounds, 5-7 pounds, but you lost a pound or 2. But if you're 25 pounds over stage weight and you lose a pound or 2, you put those pictures side by side, you probably can't even tell which one is which. because a pound doesn't really matter at that point. You know what I mean? Visually as much at that point. But yeah, when you really get lean, every little thing seems to matter a lot more to your visual look.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
And I found that, and that was completely true for me, but I think I've had a new perspective because whilst obviously I've taken care to understand the judging criteria and what you're being scored on, I haven't thought about it as much as I have this past couple of years since being a judge at shows and like having to score people on a criteria. And now I can look at my physique and I can very clearly see where I'm scoring low on and can see where maybe I make some points back. But then there's like that balance of the symmetry component. Like if people just go for condition and they chase that, and I found maybe for myself that season I was continuing to get leaner and I could, but to the sacrifice of maybe even some symmetry, which could just be body fat that I was losing, but it just made my physique not look as symmetrical. Like at that X frame kind of started dissipating.
Yeah. Well, and then too, you get into the subjective part of the sport at that point too, right? So it's like, okay, well, Judge A thinks that the super shredded look is better, but Judge B thinks that, you know, being 3 pounds over that to have a little bit more fullness is better. And that's especially bad in the bikini division where that is a division where I hear you can have, I've had clients be told in that division by judges at the same show that they're both not lean enough and too lean. You know, like it is the division by far that like you're just taking your chances that they hopefully, you know, this is what they're hopefully going for that day. And, you know, who knows, right? I mean, I've just seen people. I mean, I had a situation where I had a client this was probably like 5 years ago now, in bikini. She was going to do a show and I was like, man, I don't know if you're gonna be ready for this show. Like, you can do it, but I don't think you're gonna be ready. I think we should diet longer and do some of these other later options that you have. And she's like, well, this one's close to home. I'll do it. I was like, all right, like, just know that like you probably need to be leaner. And she went into the show and she took, I don't remember the exact placing, but like, you know, 5th out of 6th or something in her class or something like that. And they told her she needed to be leaner. And she's like, I think I'm going to do this. And I was like, okay, well, you know, let's get you leaner for this show, like 4 weeks from now or whatever you know what I mean? Whatever it was, 4 or 6 weeks down the road, let's get you leaner. And she comes back after a show and says, I think I'm going to do this other show that I found out is nearby next week. I was like, okay, but you're going to look like the same, right? Like, you know, this show didn't go great because we need to get you leaner. Like you're probably going to look the same. It might be the same outcome at this show. And this was a show in the exact same sanction, and it was only a couple hours away. And she goes there the next weekend, and she wins the whole show, wins the overall, gets her pro card. They wanted a softer look.
That's insane.
It was
it's
still the craziest thing. Like, and I was like, well, guess I was wrong on that one. I mean, the first show, it was like exactly what I was telling her. You know, I think we need to get you leaner. And then the second show, you know, in essentially the exact same spot, it wins the whole show in the same sanction, you know, against many of the same competitors because it was only a couple hours away, you know. And so, yeah, there's just, you know, like you that's where I just tell clients, you got to do more than one show. You can't put all your eggs in one basket because you could show up at the show where they, you know, well, one, you can't control who else is on stage with you. You know, you could have 10 people on stage with mediocre physiques that you beat, or you could, I mean, I did a pro show where in 2020 where I took 3rd out of 3, and the two guys that beat me both placed at IPE Worlds. And so I was like, all right, what am I going to do? They both outweighed me by, one, I think outweighed me by about 25 pounds and the other one by about 35 pounds. And what am I going to do? And so you can't control who shows up, and you can't control what the judges are looking for on that day. And so, like we said, there's a luck component. And I really do think I always try to encourage clients, do multiple shows, compete in multiple sanctions, like figure out, sometimes a beginning competitor too, you don't know what division you maybe fit best in. You're kind of in between a couple. Yeah. And I'm a big fan if a show allows it for a first-time competitor, if you can do both like men's physique and classic, and you're not sure which one you'd fit better in, or classic and bodybuilding, or sorry, there's a bunch of stuff just fell. They're doing a bunch of construction and my whole house is like shaking.
Oh no.
And so a bunch of stuff just like crashed and burned over there on my But anyways, so I'm a big fan of if if you're a beginning competitor, doing more than one division, I had a client just this spring, wasn't sure if figure or bikini was best for her. And so, I knew like if she did an untested show, it'd need to be bikini, but like she could do either if it was a drug tested show, and be all right. And she did very well in both. And so, having her do both and kind of realize like which one she liked better, which one the judges liked her in better, may give her a little more guidance going forward. I know not all sanctions let you do that, and they don't like all the crossovers and stuff, but I've always been a big advocate that, okay, I understand in like an open class, you don't want to see like someone win a pro card in like bikini and figure, right? Like they should be different looks. But I've always been a fan of like, if you have a novice or like a beginner, first time class, I'm a fan of letting them cross over, because, a new competitor, let's figure out where you fit best, and then by the time you're worried about like winning a pro card or like placing high in an open class, like, yeah, you probably know better what division you need to be in. But, I try to give people on stage different shows, different sanctions, different, especially when you're a beginner, figure out where you fit best.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And your discussion surrounding also like doing multiple shows and sanctions, but also our discussion earlier about like placings and how there's luck involved, and there's also like subjectivities involved, and how just ultimately you shouldn't place your value as an individual on your placing. Like you said, you came third, but against two wildly like impressive competitors, you shouldn't feel bad about coming third. Some people might, but ultimately it's more about the process and the journey and you bringing your all-time best. And I think that's why that sentiment gets pushed, I think, correctly, because like ultimately there's so much that's out of your hands.
Yeah, I mean, that 2020 show was my first show in 2020. If you look at the 15 shows I've done, that's probably the second or third best I ever looked on stage, and, like it's to this day, like it probably, something like that, second, third best. And so it's still successful. It just is who I was up against.
Have you, out of interest, because you mentioned trying different, what's it called? Classes. Have you tried anything other than bodybuilding? Have you tried men's physique or anything else?
No, I don't know that I'd be any good. Like, I feel like when you start heading towards classing, and especially men's physique, your genetic structure dictates there's less ways to beat people if you don't have great genetic structure. I don't have great genetic structure. Like I don't have the tiny waist and the, wide shoulders and, crazy taper and all of that and huge delts. And so, in bodybuilding, there are more ways to beat someone than there is in men's physique. Men's physique, you only have 4 poses. It's only your upper body. Well, your calves are supposed to count too, but usually it's only your upper body. And so you only have half your body. You have 4 poses. You can be too big. You can be too lean, for men's physique. Where like bodybuilding, there's more poses. You look at your entire body. You can get leaner and out-condition someone. There isn't a too lean. You can get bigger and get, there isn't a too big. So if you don't have great structure, but you're massive, like that can work, you can still overcome that structure. Yeah, so I don't know how I don't know that I would do great in men's physique. Classic I haven't done, but I don't know that I would, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have crazy structure, because you get into those divisions and it's a lot more, especially men's physique. Like, it's hard to overcome someone who has that structure if you don't. There just are less ways to overcome it in that division.
You're kind of speaking to the choir in a sense, because I'm the same as you with the structure element, and like there was no point me ever attempting men's physique. Sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I could. I'm like, no. Especially because at the WNBF, at least, I don't know if other federations are the same, but they want you straight on at the front pose, so you can't even try and manipulate that one to try and make your waist look smaller. I'm like, man, I'd be destroyed. I don't even have nice abs, so it's like this is out of the question for me. But I like the sentiment around like bodybuilding and how there is like the whole you might not have. It's probably similar to me. My symmetry round is not where I score well. The muscularity round is then when I can show off the condition, the muscularity, and you can pose like a front double bicep to twist the hips, and you can manipulate stuff. So there's more to play with.
Yeah, no, and that's where you can pose yourself. I mean, there's pictures of me next to guys on stage who are 25, 30 pounds heavier than me, and we're side by side. It doesn't look like they outweigh me by 25, 30 pounds. Like, I pose my way to, catch up into them. And you see that I just saw that at a show recently. There was one of the shows I was at recently, there was a classic physique overall, and there was one class winner had the better physique. The other class winner was maybe a touch leaner, was not as big, not as pretty of a physique, but he could pose. And just watching it overall, I was like, man, like the one guy should win. Like he is better, but the other guy's outpose, like just the pose, he hit a pose and be like, man, that smaller guy is winning. These smaller guy with not as great a structure is winning a lot of these poses. And sure enough, he ended up winning in a split decision because over a guy that should have beaten him just because his posing was simply better. And he was able to overcome the fact that he wasn't as big and his structure wasn't what the other guy's was.
Yeah, you can see it, especially when you've got a keen eye for it. You know just initially when they're standing there who has like the structure, but then sometimes people cannot pose to show it off, and you're just like, no. Like I can't score you well here because you might have it inherent, but I can't give it to you because you inherently have the structure. You need to be able to show me it.
Yeah, well, that's always a pet peeve of mine. There are certain judges that will try to judge on potential, which that always it's not about who has the most potential. At that point, what's the point of competing? It's just a genetics contest. Like it should be what's in front of you that day. Like, so and so has the most potential if they drop 10 pounds, but they didn't drop 10 pounds. So they aren't the best on stage that day. And so that's always a pet peeve of mine, that when I hear that, well, that this person won because they had more potential to do what, to do well as a pro. Sure, but they didn't get lean enough. And if they don't get lean enough as a pro, they're not going to do well either.
Yeah, I hold that same sentiment where I'm like, again, you're judging what's in front of you, not if that person hit that pose right, they'd be winning type of thing.
No, so, that's exactly it. I mean, someone has a poor tan or something and you can't see any of the detail. Like you can't, it's what you can see. It's what's in front of you.
Yeah. It's actually, that makes me laugh because I've over the last couple of years attained a bunch of tattoos. Thankfully, nothing off. It's only forearms, so I'm paying attention to the areas that are going to matter most for bodybuilding. But there was someone who was like covered in tattoos last time I judged, and I was like, I can see that he's really lean when I can, because I've got a good eye for it. But when he poses, the tattoos are hiding quite a lot, and it's like I can't just. It's a hard one to balance sometimes. Anyway, that was a tangent, but similar to the tan sort of situation.
It's crazy how much with tattoos Dream Tan can cover up, though. Like there have been multiple times where like I'll see someone, we'll get a workout in the off season, or I'll see them whenever, a competitor, right? And not like one of my clients, just someone you see competing or whatever, and then you see them, you see them on stage, you see them in the off season, you're like, man, didn't realize you had like those tattoos. Like couldn't even tell with like the Dream Tan. It's amazing what that can cover up.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, I've seen some like crazy transformations of people like using makeup and like they can hide them. Unfortunately, Dream Tan I think is banned in most competitions in the UK. I don't know how many in the US
Yeah,
ban it.
it depends on the show and the sanction here. You know, I was fortunate I could use it at both my shows. If I can use it, I'm using it. You know, the color is just so much better. It's just, um, I feel like some people have ruined it for everybody. You know, like,
Yeah,
you know, yeah, it doesn't dry. You can't lean up on stuff. You can't whatever. So you need to be responsible with it. But like, you know, I always, you know, if I'm doing a show, I'll reach out to like the promoter and be like, hey, ahead of time, hey, is Dream Tan allowed? If they say no, fine, I'll use an alternative, right? I'll still probably do my own because I trust I'll get dark enough more than most of the show tanners out there. But you know, in bodybuilding, because in bodybuilding, you need to be darker than like, you know, men's physique, bikini. I always tell them, go use the show tanner. You'll be the same color as everybody else. And you can be too dark in those divisions. You don't want to use Dream Tan on I've used it on a men's physique guide lightly. You don't want to use it on a bikini competitor.
yeah, I can see that.
You know, and so, you know, go use the spray service. Like you'll be the same color as everyone else. It'll be dark enough for your division. But bodybuilding, you get such an advantage in those divisions with extreme looks if you can use Dream Tan. And so like I said, I always just ask ahead of time. Worst thing to say is no. You know, like if the answer is yes, great. You know, like, but usually the answer is yeah, as long as you're responsible with it. You know, like you know, the ones that say yes, like that usually come. And it's like, yeah, of course. You know, and so you know, if there's shows, I just had a client actually, he's doing a show end of September. He emailed me last week and said, hey, they're emailing stuff out about like show tanning. Should I sign up for that? He's a bodybuilder, first show ever. And I said, ask him if they allow Dream Tan. He did. They said, sure. I said, no, we're using Dream Tan. You know, like you're in bodybuilding. And I'm going to be at the show anyway. I'll put the Dream Tan on, you know, and so, you know, that's my at least opinion on it is just ask, you know, like it you know, worst they can say is no, you know, and then you find something, you use something else. You know, I had some pretty good color. I did a show in 2016 where I couldn't use Dream Tan and I did my own tan and used Dark As and had some really good color. And a lot of times that's what I'll use as a base for under Dream Tan, is Dark As, which comes from the UK. We got to get it shipped, you know, internationally to get it here. But I like that stuff. I've had good success with it. Just had a client actually this last weekend use Dark As and Dream Tan combo and got some good color up, you know, great color from it.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that. And I think it's great advice also asking, because they might have a rule.
You don't want to show
general.
up and
Oh, and you also don't want to do it in case it's banned, and then you're done.
Yeah.
And Dark As, the challenge with those two is you need someone on hand who's willing to apply it, who can do a decent enough job.
Yeah. And so that's where a lot of times it's like, you know, when clients ask me, right? Like if they're, you know, if they're an experienced competitor, they've used it before, whatever, but if they're a first time competitor and I'm not going to be there, you know, and I don't know if they, you know, then I'm like, okay, like, you know, get the spray tan, you know, reduce your stress, you know. So I think it depends on the situation, but like if I can be there and the show allows Dream Tan and they're in like a more extreme division. I mean, we had a women's bodybuilder do IPE Worlds a couple of years ago. My wife put her Dream Tan on, you know, like, you know, it and the other competitors in her class also had Dream Tan on, you know, like, because if it's allowed in those extreme divisions, other people are going to use it. I mean, the part that frustrates me though are the shows that tell you can't use it, and so then you follow the rules, or your client follows the rules, and then like 3/4 of their class is using it anyway. And I was like, you know, it's like, man, like if I'd have known that, we'd have just used it because it gives them such an advantage. You know, I've had that happen before where I told the client to ask ahead, the client was told no, so they plan for something else, and then like 3/4 of their class are using it anyway, and that's on the promoter at that point. Like you need to give a constant message, you know, whether it's a yes or a no.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. That should be, they should either not be allowed to compete, or they get judged down, or whatever it is. Like that, they're breaking a rule.
Or just
essentially
tell people they can use it, you know, like
well, that.
Okay with it. Yeah, like either direction, right? Just stick with one, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One question I did want to ask you, Pete, was you mentioned it before, how you kept this prep quiet. And I'm just interested in that, to know kind of what led to you making that decision, and how did it go for you being quiet? How quiet versus other preps as well? Because I don't know how loud you are normally about them.
Yeah, I mean, usually people are aware that I'm dieting and getting leaner and stuff during prep. Like, 2020, I don't know. I'm usually not one to say I'm doing this show and this show and this show, but like I was clearly dieting for shows, and like it was pretty well known that I was. Like, my social media, would have like comparison pictures with previous preps and at that point and stuff. And so like people were aware I was dieting, and then my show got canceled at like 6 days out. And I took a lot of crap for continuing my prep for through all that and competing in June and July. And then I took a lot of crap for traveling around the country during everything in June and July and competing. And so at that point I was like, screw it. If everyone's just going to give me their opinion on everything, they don't need to know what I'm doing. I'm just going to do my own thing. And so I was just fed up, you know what I mean? Like it just seemed like everyone had an opinion on what I was doing at that point. And so I was like, I'm going to do what I want to do. And so then I was like, next time I diet, I'm just going to show up somewhere and compete. And so I kept it really, really quiet. I mean, really very few people knew that I was dieting for shows. I mean, there were maybe a handful that even knew what shows I was doing. You know what I mean? It's like it was very, very, very few. I actually, when I did my first show of the year, so I sent all my clients emails, like if I'm gonna be gone for a show, like on Monday morning, I'll shoot them out, everyone out like a mass email and be like, hey, I'm gone, show this weekend, get your updates in by like 5 p.m. Thursday so that we can get things squared away these next few days while I'm here. And you're not waiting on me while I'm traveling. And so I'll send those out, for the week or whatever. And so the week of my first show this year, I sent out an email first thing that Monday morning. And I went as far as even saying, my wife and I are getting out of town for a long weekend away before contest season starts. Cause again, I was competing before most of my clients. Right. And so, just get things in by whatever time Thursday. And so everyone just assumed it was a weekend away, and little did they know I was traveling to Buffalo to do a show. And all of a sudden it was show day and I had competed. And so I mean, people didn't really know, you know what I mean? And so it was great. Like none of my clients knew, which I took that kind of as a compliment, that like none of my prep didn't bleed over and affect my ability to coach, because none of my clients realized that I was like dieting for shows or competing. There were people, it got tough when I gave 3 different seminars, one in January, 2 in February. And so like I would wear big baggy hoodies and, but you could see in my, like people who knew could see like in my face, they suspected something was up. But yeah, I have to say it was so much less stressful to like just prep and just worry about me and not worry about like what people thought of me. Like even in the gym, I just stayed covered up. It was winter, so I just wear a hoodie and sweatpants all the time. So I was covered up the whole time. And I think in a weird way that probably actually helped me with my performance in the gym. Because a lot of times you see yourself getting super lean, at least to me, I see myself getting super lean and I assume, oh, well, my strength's going to drop or I'm going to be super weak because like, look how lean I am now. I was covered up all the time in the gym. I didn't, and so I didn't have, you know what I mean? Like those thoughts never went through my head during the workout because I was just wearing it wasn't like, look how lean I am, whatever. I was just
placebo
covered
yourself.
up in a hoodie. Yeah, I didn't see myself. So, and so I do think that might have, in a weird way kind of helped me. But yeah, I definitely, it's kind of funny because it's like the exact opposite of what most people do now, right? Like, they record everything and everybody's an influencer now. And my phone when I'm at the gym is either in my car or in my locker, locked away. It's not on anywhere near me. I get better workouts that way. I just train harder, better workouts. But but yeah, it was really, I don't know, it was nice because I didn't get the constant like questions of like, when are you going to compete? What's your weight? Oh, you're going to win your show for sure, or, like those
Yeah.
comments from people that don't get it or don't know. I'm like, yeah, we'll see who shows up, like, and so, yeah, it was nice. I really, I probably, like I said, I wasn't ever one that was big on like saying I'm doing this show or whatever, like, but people would know I was dieting for shows. But it was really nice to just not have anyone know I was dieting. And so like my conversations during daily life weren't just people asking me about prep constantly. Like they were like normal, like conversations you would have, right? It wasn't just someone asking you about your prep all the time.
Yeah, I thought when I read that about you being quiet about it, I just, again, it was very interesting to me because it's, like you said, opposite to what most people do. And throughout my kind of even fitness like career, like part of it has always been sharing my process, whether it be like off season, a mini cut, whatever it is, like getting to stage. I've shared every part. In fact, like I normally vlog the period of time I'm going to stage. But the points you mentioned about kind of just keeping it to yourself, not having anyone question you about any element of it. Like you've got your stuff under control, but when you keep getting these nagging questions, even if they're like positive comments, it just makes you think about the whole process more than like if it's just a little bit on the back burner, because it has to be on the front burner. But if it can be more on the back burner, then I can see it just running so much smoother. And you just don't talk to anyone about it.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it too, I still was in that, when I started this, I feel like I'm old saying this, but like I was still, my first show when I started lifting was 2002. When I started, I went to my first show like and attended in 2003, and then did my first show in spring of 04. And so, back when I was getting into all of this, there really wasn't like, the online community and stuff. And so a lot of the guys that were competing or dieting down for shows, most of them did stay covered up in the gym. Most of them, you didn't know what they looked like. You maybe knew they were dieting for a show, but and there were fewer shows then, but like there was a lot less out there. Like guys would just show up at shows, like there, what I mean, like out of nowhere, like who is this guy? And so the internet and social media and everything wasn't what it is 20 years later here. And so I knew it could be done because I'd seen all kinds of people do it when I was getting into it. But like I was someone too where like I'm sure that you can go look on bodybuilding.com and find like my preps from especially I don't know how much I did in 04, but like 06, 08, 2012, those are all, on there somewhere. I'm sure, unless they've deleted, like that, the forums from that long ago. But like all my stuff's out there too. You know what I mean? Like everything.
Yeah.
And then, even 16 and 20, there's a lot on my social media from that, from getting into the show. But I think, just having, I don't know, like I said, I feel like I'm young enough that like I'm, in a social media age, but I'm old enough that like my first prep was still before all of, first couple of preps were still before all of this.
Yeah, I think I first competed in 2014, so that was like I think Instagram had just started, and so like YouTube was a real thing. That was when Matt August was a real like big person over on YouTube. So I kind of got into competing almost through like Matt and 3DMJ and big on YouTube. So then it made me want to like share that, and now it's just got to the point where it's become normal to share and document like that process. But it's like I'm weighing up. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, even before that, though, it was the forums, like all the 3DMJ guys, like you look back, like us all talking to each other on the bodybuilding.com forums, like following each other's training logs back in like 2006 or 2008. You know what I mean? Like that's, I think that, for me, I was competing before that, but you know what I mean? Like that's where like I learned a lot more about natural bodybuilding was the forums back in the day.
I think, I have this struggle with, and I think this is what it comes down to is for me personally, I don't compete for business. It might have a tag on benefit towards the business, but I compete for myself. So if it's going to be better for me to keep it quiet, maybe that's the route to go down versus like competing and sharing it all, which might make me feel worse about the process, but be better for like the business somehow. So yeah, maybe my next prep, I might take a kind of a page out of your book.
Yeah. And, you know, that was a concern of mine, actually, when I, you know, decided to keep it quiet. I was like, okay, well, that means I can't post really any pictures of myself that are current from, you know, basically like September of last year. Like I think the last current picture of myself I posted like was like at the end of that, like, you know, off-season cut, right? So it was like September-ish of last year until I actually compete. So I was like, all right, I got 6-7 months here. It can't be any current pictures of me unless I'm like fully clothed. And so like, can I create content? Can I still get clients results? Can I, you know, like do enough that my business doesn't suffer? And it didn't at all. You know, like I said, most of my, you know, like I said, I found it pretty awesome to hear from a lot of my clients that they had no clue I was even dieting for a show. Because that shows how little it bled over into my coaching, that nobody could tell the difference.
With your coaching, how does your check-in process work? Do you have to show your face, or is it
No?
Okay.
No, I do. So I don't do video check-in. I'm not the super high technology coach. I always tell people, you want something flashy and fancy, I am not your coach. So my clients check in twice weekly via email, and then they can always email any other time or anything like that too. But you know, my check-ins are more email conversations, and so I would say for a lot of my clients too, I don't know if they'd have time to send me videos twice a week to tell me how things are going. Like, you know, and so I know some people prefer that. I don't do video check-ins, and so I don't have to really show my face, and so that part helps also. Yeah. But yeah, that would probably make it a little tougher. But the changes, if you're doing it every week, the changes are probably so gradual they may not notice the difference.
Just have to, I don't know, grow out a beard and like always stay clothed and take lots of caffeine beforehand, so you're not like slurring or like talking too slowly.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's funny though, like I was on a couple of podcasts like earlier this year when I was within like a month or two of shows, and you know, and I'm like, you know, hoodie, and like I'm sure they could see in my face, but like nobody really mentioned much. But they're like, oh, when are you competing again? And I'm like, you know, it's gonna be a while. You know, truly at this point it is gonna be a while. I literally just competed 3.5 months ago, but like, you know, it was just, yeah, I don't know. It was just, there's something so much enjoyable to just, I felt like I was doing it for myself and because I enjoyed it, and it was a challenge of me getting as lean as I possibly could, you know, and yeah, it ended up me looking the best I have, and you know, it worked out great. But yeah, it was just like you said, nobody's questioning anything that you're doing. You're not getting advice from like guy who's never competed in the gym that you should be eating your tilapia to thin your skin or something, like, you know, or whatever, right? Like it was nice. Like you know, it wasn't like every single conversation I had with every single person all day long, which it can be when you put everything out there like that. You know, if people know you're getting close to shows, that's the first thing. You know, like I'm guilty of that too, right? Like if I know someone's close to a show, that's probably one of the first things I ask him when I talk to him. You know, how's prep going? You know, like, and so it just was nice to not have that be like the topic of every single conversation.
Yeah, and I think even the concerns from like a business perspective, you mentioned you didn't like, it actually wasn't a problem for you, but you've like, once you've competed, then you have all the photos, you have all the, you can share all the process you want, you can come on this podcast and talk about it. So like you just see it on the back end versus the front end. So I'm convinced myself further here.
And I did my photo shoot before my first show. And so, I did a photo shoot with Cliff's wife, Haley, again. She did a photo shoot for my wife and I in 2020 when we were lean, and I did another one with her this year. And the pictures turned out like awesome. There's some that are just crazy. I can't even believe they're me. So I did that photo shoot like 10 days out from my first show. And so like I have all these awesome pictures and I couldn't share like any, you know, until my shows were done, right? Like I couldn't share any of them. And so like now I got a stockpile of like, I don't know, like 40 of them or whatever I got from that, photo shoot. So like I've used maybe half a dozen or whatever at this point, but like, I'm good for, it gives me my stockpile for a few years to have cool pictures when you have like an educational post and you need a picture to grab people's attention, because your post isn't going to get any reach and nobody's going to like it unless it has a cool picture.
Yeah, for sure. It's Instagram, and
Yeah,
I think
that's how it works.
Yeah, and I think it's nice even for someone listening if they're like, oh, I couldn't imagine competing and not sharing the process because for whatever reason that's super important to them. I would say that almost makes me doubt someone's reason for competing. Like if you're like, oh, being quiet about it actually sounds kind of nice, then to me that's someone doing it for the right reasons, because they're doing it for themselves, not for the gram or whatever, not for other people. They're doing it just for themselves.
Yeah. No, and that was part of my, I agree. I mean, because like you and I, like we coach for a living, so like in theory, it could potentially hurt us to not share what we're actually doing, in theory, right? But like if we're okay with it and fine with it, yeah. I mean, someone who's not, but I think it's up to each person, right? Like
Yeah.
I am someone who I don't, like I said, I'm not someone. I gives me a lot of anxiety to like record myself lifting. I don't do it. Like I know a lot of coaches like, I want to see videos of this and this and this. It gives me a lot of anxiety. I'll stop sets short of failure. I'll be questioning everything the whole set. Like it just messes with my, you know what I mean? Like I'm just not if I, like I said, my phone's nowhere near me. If I can just focus on doing my thing, like it usually goes smoother. But again, that's my personality and me personally, and that might not be you know what I mean? Everyone's different in that.
I get that feeling when someone, and it doesn't happen to me often, but normally it's like if someone randomly comes over and starts spotting me, I'm like, no, I don't want this. That starts giving me anxiety. I'm like, no, this feels weird. Like I don't want, I'm so used to training on my own, doing my own thing. I have like numbers in my head I want to achieve, and then they come over, I'm like, now I just start, like, I get that kind of similar thing that you get from recording yourself with the phone.
No, I mean, it's funny because even like my wife, like she'll record some stuff going into a powerlifting meet just to make sure she's hitting depth on a squat from the side or something. Because I'll be spotting her. I can't tell her if, for sure from the rear, it's hard to tell. And, but even with that, like she's very, very, sparingly, right? Like it's not, recording everything. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I sound old, I feel like, when I'm on these podcasts, and I'm like, back in my day when, because my wife will always make fun of me because I've been doing this so long. So I'll be talking to a client about like, back in whatever, we did this, or it used to be like this, you have it so much easier now, or it's so much different now because of this or that. And, she's always like, back in my day, so it's yeah, I don't know where the last like 20 years have gone. So it's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild to think like next year will have been my decade of competing. But I competed like when I was 24, so I was considerably older than you. But so, even thinking that I've almost come into a decade of working in the fitness industry, I'm like, oh, wow, like I feel like I'm a bit of an old dog.
It is though. I mean, if there aren't that many people who continuously keep like competing, keep like prepping people for shows for a decade or more. Like you see a lot of people come and go, and you get to a decade or more, like I mean, there aren't that many people. It's amazing how many people drop off. Like you'll see them and you'll be like, oh, this guy has all the potential in the world, and you see him for a few years, and then they're just gone.
Yeah, I totally see what you mean. Pete, so for this off season, do you have any is there any particular plans? Is it more of the same? Do you have eyes on like another year? I know you compete like every 2 to 4 years anyway.
Yeah. I mean, so I'm 37 right now. I 2020 prep I was 34 at that point, and that prep got dragged out so long because of, the world shutting down and my shows getting pushed back. After that prep, it took me a long time to like mentally come around to like wanting to compete again. And I was like, I don't know if I'm even going to compete before I'm 40. Like I might just wait till I'm 40. And then I ended up competing, at 37 this spring, and it's going to be at least 40, I would think, the next time. Like, I haven't done less than like this was 3 years between shows, and that was the shortest I had done for an off season since like '06 to, 04 to '06 to '08. Otherwise, I had been doing 4 years. Just the way like life and things worked out. And so, yeah, I mean, I would imagine at least 3, if not 4 years, probably. I definitely am going to keep doing it. Like I said, my goal is to be someone doing some of these 50 plus and 60 plus classes. I mean, that's part of the reason why we started sponsoring at the OCB Viking each fall, we sponsor the 50 plus legends class. So it's $1,000 payout to the winner of the 50 plus like men's bodybuilding class, because back when that show started, there really weren't places for 50 plus guys to compete in the US here, like for money, right? They'd have to compete in masters against 40 plus guys. And so now there's a few more, more shows are picking up 50 plus. They realize there's a demand there. And so there's more 50 plus pro shows. But like, I want to be the guy doing those classes, you know what I mean? And at 13 years, when I get to that point. So yeah, I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. And so we keep working to get better, and well, come back, do master's class, at 40, 41, whatever it is when I diet down next.
That's awesome. Now after this podcast and after this prep, everyone's going to be like, you're competing, aren't you, Pete? They're just going to think every year, you're competing now, aren't you? You're just going to be like, no, I don't believe you.
God, I'm only 3.5 months post show. Yeah. I'm still at the point where I'm like, yeah, I feel normal. I'm eating a good amount of food. Like, I'm not dieting anytime soon, there was a week here recently when I checked in with Cliff, and he's like, you're only, I was only up a couple tenths of a pound, and he's like, oh, let's just leave things the same. And I said, I'm fine with that. The longer we can drag this out and make it take till I diet again, like,
yeah, for sure.
I'm good with that at this point. Well, you know how it is coming off of prep. Like, you almost mentally have to I feel like you have to mentally get to a place where you're like, okay, I can do like an off-season mini cut again. And then at some point beyond that, you get to a place where it's like, okay, I can actually diet for a show again. Mentally put into it what you need to put into it.
Yeah, it takes a bit of time. I've definitely had off seasons where I've mini cut and I haven't been mentally ready for it. And it's like, wow, yeah. That was just bad on every front. Like, I almost view a mini cut in an off season as like, that should be something you'd like a craving. Like, you're like, thank God I can now mini cut.
But, in a related note though, you see that a lot of times in competitors who compete over and over and over again. Like, the people who try to do like spring, fall, like there's a show in their town in the spring and the fall. And so they're doing spring, fall, and they're just dieting always for shows. But a lot of times in those situations, those people can really start to, physiological issues with that aside, with hormones, metabolic rate and whatnot from just dieting over and over and over again. Psychologically, they can really have a hard time going where they need to go when it comes time to diet for a show, because they've never had it's always dieting. It's always, so restricted. And, I can go where I need to go during prep. I was, like the depletions going into my shows, I hit some super, some pretty low calorie days for me that were way below my off season numbers. And, I'll do what I got to do, but like, I'm not willing to turn around and do that 6 months later. I don't know if I could. I don't think most people could. And I think that's why people who compete over and over and over again, oftentimes you don't see them get like absolutely peeled, if you know what I mean, every single time, because they just, you don't have that mental break to like, eat in a surplus, have some balance with life, and then be able to turn around and, okay, I'm mentally ready to cut now, and do what I got to do.
Yeah, it's so important. Like the 2 to 4 years that you've been taking off, I think is a really smart move for particularly natural competitors. So I think that's great advice. If people are, again, it comes down to that kind of yo-yo dieting sort of aspect again, where like people are just not setting themselves up well, and they could end up just looking worse over time versus better, and no one wants that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, also just, I don't have, I'm married, I don't have kids, but like just the family aspect of it too, and having more balance with life, because as balanced as you try to be during prep, you don't have, you know what I mean? Like you don't have, it still skews towards prep. And so, I think having some of that balance with, like it's good for like relationships and, and family and in general to not be constantly dieting for something, and picking your spots a little bit more.
For sure. Yeah, definitely your friends, family, loved ones definitely appreciate the time when people are well fed, and you're not the kind of slightly grumpy person that you end up inevitably somewhat becoming in prep.
Yeah. As much as you try not to, it just by the end, people with striated glutes, it looks cool, but it doesn't feel good, and they're usually not in the greatest mood.
Yeah, no, for sure. Pete, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been a really lovely chat, talking about your prep and experience, and also I think lots of take homes for the listeners. If people want to keep up to date with everything that you're doing, kind of get a look in at your coaching, where should they head?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, fitbodyphysique.com. I'm on Instagram at fitbodyphysique, or I'm like on Facebook as myself. And yeah, that's about it for my social media, just Facebook and Instagram. I don't have all the fancy ones.
But yeah, no, what's it now? Well, Threads. Have you not come onto Threads yet?
I actually haven't come to Threads yet.
Okay.
So but I was never on Twitter, which Threads is supposed to be similar to. So
yeah, it's basically the same thing, but if less is more in many cases. So yeah, keep it to the Instagram and Facebook, and again, that will be linked in the bio, or in the description if people want to kind of check out Pete and see what he's up to. And otherwise, thank you for listening. Thank you, Pete, once again, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality, and we know how to do it, and we will help you achieve this. The Minicut movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.